First of all, my apologies. I'm supposed to like have this like virtual background, but apparently like my screen is stuck on this IBM queue. So I do
No,
apologize
no, no
for
worries, no
that.
worries.
Okay. So anyway, guys, I mean, thank you very much for the invite. I think it's great to kind of meet everybody, even though it is virtually, right? I'm going to conduct this presentation in a little bit differently, right? Because I think, as far as like the major cloud providers go, like we're clearly one of like the bigger players out there, so again, we compete most of the times with Azure, with, with Google, with AWS, et cetera, et cetera. So, and in our view, most of the services, is really, kind of, if you talk about virtual machines, we've got virtual machines. You talk about storage, we've got storage. If you talk about a CDN network, we've got a CDN network. A lot of the, almost greater than 50% of the service across each individual service providers, they usually commoditized. So, so what's so different about IBM Cloud, and where is our strategic focus? I'm just going to give you a little bit of a view on that today. I'm also going to incorporate a little bit of a demo, because I think, seeing is believing, and really showing you guys like what we really mean, not in any conceptual sense, but in a sense that it's actually here today. It's actually implementable. Okay, so let me just like make this and I'll make it presentation mode for the moment, and I will change it back as I need to. Okay, so we're going to talk about the strategic focus of IBM Cloud and how it relates to where the market is going, right? Because like we're not personally like I'm not that interested in a virtual machine, not terribly interested in any kind of like basic services, because people have that. However, and we of course we do too, but I wanted to give everyone on this event a view on where the next 5 years is going to be, because IBM has started prepping for the next 5 years in the last 2 years, right? Which related to our acquisition of Red Hat, which relates to our continued focus into cloud. We've also redid our entire software portfolio to accommodate to the new technology. So I'm going to explain what that means. Okay, so our agenda will be this as follows. Because there's demos kind of like integrated into each one of these, 30 minutes is going to be really tough for me to kind of fit it all in, but I'm going to try. So first thing, I'm sure everyone has heard about cloud native. I'm sure your customers have started talking about, hey, how do we develop applications that are cloud native? Can I buy a cloud native like off the shelf application? Can I get a SaaS option to the piece of software, right? What does that really mean? Cloud native is really an architectural style that is designed to work within a cloud environment, and that is designed to kind of scale in a very large sense that is not monolithic. So if you think about the way applications were developed in the past, everything was tightly integrated. You needed like big machines to scale, but in the cloud, people are often talking about microservices style architecture, which means you can scale a particular service depending on whether that service is being utilized by an application. For example, if you have an application that handles user traffic like a load balancer, you may want to scale up that load balancer to accommodate for more user traffic, for example, right? So that's a really easy example to understand. But this concept can be applied to just about any component in the infrastructure. It could be a function that handles incoming requests. It could be a function that writes things to the database. It could be a function that like handles user logins, for example. Okay, so the idea here is that the application as you see it in the user interface is now composed of a suite of smaller services that are independently scalable. Now, if you wanted to do this in a traditional virtual machine environment, that would mean deploying one virtual machine for every single service. And not only is that a very expensive proposition, that is inherently a non-starter, right? Because each application maybe runs like, very small, but even if you spin up a really tiny virtual machine, still costs you a bit of money, still requires that you do a bit of networking. So there is a technology, I'm sure you've heard of it before, that is currently growing almost exponentially at a CAGR of like 35% annually. And this is the technology that we believe is going to be the future of the way applications are being deployed over the next 5-10 years, right? Until maybe like the next iteration of tech comes along. Okay, so I have a chart here that illustrates the growth of the container market over the last, I guess, almost 10 years now, right? And forecasted to 2025. You can see here in the last, between 2021 and 2022, that growth is already like fairly significant, right? I mean, this is 2022 is obviously projected growth, right? But it's projected to grow at a very, very steep CAGR. One of the reasons why it's growing at such a rate, it's not exponential, but it's growing at a very significant rate, is because more and more application providers, off the shelf, IBM enterprise applications, are realizing that this is actually the most efficient way to support applications, either from an on-premise perspective or as a SaaS application. So whereas in the past, a COTS application, commercial off-the-shelf application, really would send updates in the form of executable packages, would send updates in the form of, okay, here's a new update, you have to download, you have to install it, you have to do that upgrade, right? However, if you're deploying your application in a containerized fashion, not only is that application delivery very robust, it actually takes less money to support and less money to implement across multiple customers. So one of the main reasons why there's a significant amount of growth, not only is there adoption at the customer level, from a vendor perspective, it makes a lot more commercial sense to also deploy it in this fashion, right? And of course, all the other benefits, like it's a lot more flexible, it's a lot cheaper to deploy at scale, so on and so forth. Okay, so with this as a backdrop, it really then gives you an understanding of why IBM bought Red Hat. So let me just get that away. One of the main reasons, and it's not the only reason, obviously, but one of the big reasons we did it was because IBM now owns the most popular or the most widely adopted container orchestration platform around, right? It's called OpenShift, and it's available as you can see in Azure. It's available on AWS. It's available on IBM Cloud. It's available on premise. So one of the key reasons why this is so important, and one of the key reasons why we've brought this up, and our title of the presentation today, is because through a single interface, you are now able to take a code base and deploy it to IBM Cloud. You can deploy it to Amazon. You can deploy it to Alibaba, like our friend just talked about. You can deploy it on OpenShift, on AWS. You can deploy it on premise. You don't have to change the application as you go across different locations. And I'm going to show you a technology today, which has just been released. It's pretty exciting. It's called IBM Cloud Satellite. You may have heard this in conversations with IBM. It allows us to orchestrate the deployment of OpenShift clusters across multiple clouds. So for example, if you look at these offerings over here on OpenShift, if you went to AWS and you said, okay, let's deploy OpenShift, right? You'd have to spin up virtual machines. You'd have to, do your own networking, and then you'd have to put OpenShift on it, and then you have an OpenShift cluster. So it's easy, but it also requires a little bit of work. And the same is required if you go to Microsoft Azure. However, with the IBM Cloud Satellite product, which I'll show you later, you can actually, through a single click, very, very easy to set up. We can set up OpenShift clusters, which are now orchestrated through IBM, and we can target deployments into OpenShift into an AWS infrastructure, into your on-premise infrastructure, into your Alibaba infrastructure, whatever that may be, and we can then control it via IBM Cloud, and then do cool things like deploy applications into these things. So not only is the OpenShift setup a lot easier, the application deployment is a lot easier, and I'll show you what that means. It is completely, which we actually did a demonstration to a very large international bank on Friday. Very impressive. So we make it a lot easier for the client to manage hybrid environments, whether it's with it's on-premise, whether it's on a different cloud, irrelevant, right? And we make it very easy to set up pipelines for application deployment that don't really have to be in the customer side. It can reside in the cloud, but deployed over a link into the customer location. Okay, so that's all I really want to talk about for this piece. Now, the next thing that is key to this is we just had an announcement over the next, about a month ago, right, in September 23rd. Okay, so the announcement said, extend financial service level controls to any environment with IBM Cloud Satellite. Now, what does that really mean? I only have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try to chunk through this, maybe 15 minutes if they give me a bit of a leeway. I'm going to try to chunk through this as quickly as possible, but this is an important concept to understand. We can now dynamically put financial level controls, which we define that is part of a global framework that we can bring to the table. We can implement that into individual satellite clusters that reside in different environments like AWS, Azure, on-premise, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, so we can extend benchmark, regulatory level controls into any environment that we deploy satellite into, and of course we can report against that. Okay, so I'm just gonna move really quickly down the line. So you guys have heard satellite. What is satellite? Satellite is essentially the ability for IBM Cloud to deploy OpenShift clusters and other IBM Cloud services into a location of our choice. Okay, so keep that in mind because I'm going to show you a demo really soon. And then, you know what? Let me show you the demo right now. That's going to be a lot easier to do. So if you go into IBM Cloud Satellite, you'll see our friend Jake here, and he will give you a bit of an overview on what it is. But more importantly, if you have an IBM Cloud account, you can actually go into, if you guys can see my screen, you can actually go into over here, Satellite, and you can look at what the overview is. So as a quick demonstration, I have a few locations that I've created. Each of these locations are not, this is of course in IBM Cloud, but that's just because it's a demo environment. The other guys, this one's in Makati, so I believe this one's in Philippines and somewhere, and this is in Malaysia. Okay, so we can also put this in AWS, we can put this in Azure, as I mentioned, and we connect to these environments not via VPN tunnel. You don't need any sophisticated networking. All we need to do is set up some minimal configurations. We have to open some outbound ports, and we can actually establish endpoints without the need for any crazy networking. So if you imagine, if you talk to AWS, you talk to Azure, maybe Alibaba as well, and you say, I want to create a virtual private cloud. You'd be like, great, what's your direct link? Can you do a VPN tunnel? Can you do an IPsec? With a satellite environment, you can see here that every single server that you have here, they're all private IP addresses. They do not expose any public IP addresses. As you know, IPsec VPNs have to expose a public address, and then you route it, and it's routed by the internet, that kind of thing. Not that it's a bad solution, it's a pretty good solution, but this takes it a step further, okay? So it's all public IP addresses. And then for those of you guys who know networking, you guys are probably wondering, how does it connect, right? That is something that's unique to IBM. That is something that, you know, if you have a conversation with myself or anyone else on our team, we will give you the background on how this is done, okay? And we are more than happy to actually explain and demonstrate to you like how that is actually achieved, okay? So a little bit of networking magic for you to help understand, and a bit of follow-up for us to do again. Okay, so the next thing it's really important to understand is within this private environment, I am now able to create what is known as a DevOps pipeline. So a DevOps pipeline, as in our terms, is, you know, as you know, people use Jenkins, people use whatever, but we have our own product. So let me just like jump through a couple of slides here. Let me just make this a little bit bigger, right? So in a financial services environment, you know, there's a CICD process that runs, right? It builds applications, and then it ultimately goes from a build into a deployment. With our DevOps products on the IBM Cloud, we are able to deploy not just into a satellite environment, which is really interesting. We can also do infrastructure as code deployments. We can do it behind the firewall. We can maintain security controls during the process, right? And through this center, which I'm going to demonstrate very shortly, we can implement controls that we bring to the table that will allow, you know, financial institutions to report to their auditors that, hey, everything is in line. We can generate documentation to give to your auditors and that type of thing. And most importantly, we run it across the pipeline on the left here, and we run it at the same time on the right after deployment in a runtime environment. Okay, so something to think about, but let me show you what that actually means. Okay, so if I go back over here, I just have to navigate over to my security and compliance center. If you guys can sign up for a free account on IBM Cloud, you guys can actually play around with this, okay? So if I go here, immediately, like I have a dashboard, right? But I can actually check out what my scan results are. So for the satellite environment that I have shown you just now, I have actually a set of controls that I have put in place. I just put in the regular IBM Cloud best practice controls version 1, okay? But I will show you what other options that we actually have. So over in version 1, I have 344 total controls, out of which I have failed 92, right? Obviously, I've been a bad boy, and you know this is not something I have done very well. But as you can see here also, I have run a scan once every day just to check. So this is what a security and compliance officer would see. And if you were to drill down exactly on what is out of compliance and what is in violation, I just have to click into this view here. Of course, Athil looks like she has a question, but of course, I think Raymond can answer the question if he's on. Yeah, I'll answer your questions later, Athil. I'll give a bit of time to answer. Okay, so I can actually look at the actual resource that has failed the compliance, and I can see what actually has failed. Ensure block storage for VPC enabled with the encryption key. So I haven't done it with my encryption key, therefore I have failed the control. And so I need to, as an officer, as an infrastructure admin, I need to go in and enable the storage with an encryption key, and then the scan will run again, and then it'll become green like you see here. Okay, so the next question will be, where do these controls come from? So let me show you. If I go into my my profiles, okay, you can you can see here that we have a whole bunch of profiles to be included. So when we say IBM Cloud for Financial Services Controls, I can click into this, and you can see that it is, for those of you guys who are security and compliance professionals, you can see that these are based on the NIST families. So which means that you have to have access control, configurations. So check whether blah, 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 and this will be if it's an IBM Cloud or an Azure or in whatever, as long as you are a financial institution and you have to comply to NIST, this is actually what you have to get, okay? So we've got all these set of controls ready to go, ready to put in a collector. And if you implement it into IBM Cloud Satellite, these set of controls can be monitored by IBM and reported again. So you don't have to go and install something in your environment. IBM can monitor if your controls are in place or not. Now, of course, if you need additional details, please let me know, and then we will be able to set up a call and I can walk you through this in detail. This is a pretty long discussion. But as you can see here, we don't only have IBM Cloud Financial Services. We have also other profiles that you can then pick and choose. You can have a Kubernetes profile, you can have a SQL Server profile, you can have a MySQL profile. If you guys are not using Satellite, you can actually just implement it within your AWS environment or Alibaba, whatever it is. Okay, so that'll be a different kind of step. But the next, you guys might ask, what if I have something custom? Yes, you can actually just create your own custom profile that you want to run. Okay, it has to be definable. It has to be something that a collector can go and check against. But yes, you can create your own profiles. All right. So taken in I just want to summarize with this. Taken in combination, we have an offering at runtime, IBM Cloud Satellite. We have an offering to maintain security, and our main focus is really, containers, which is where the industry is headed for the next 5 years. In 5 years' time, I guarantee you the applications that you buy will probably be, in the form of a container. And you'll probably have to, instead of managing virtual machines, infrastructure administrators will probably have to start learning how to manage container infrastructure. And what better way to do it than to use OpenShift? So I will stop here and I will pause for some questions because I believe there are some questions that people would like to ask. And I'll answer them like live actually. So maybe do they have to unmute or something? Like how does this work? Questions?
For the questions, they have to send us the question in the Q&A panel or chat.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So I got two
because we're using webinar platform. So the video and audio functions or mic controls are muted for our participants, but they can interact with us using the Q&A.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see one question on the Q&A. So Don John, yes, we actually do have an offering, which I didn't talk about today, but yes, we do lift and shift for AS400 for sure. And that's actually a big part of what we do. So let's do a call on that because like we do that. 50% of my conversations is OpenShift. The other 50% is IBM I and AIX. I'm assuming you can hear me, right? So answer live. Okay, done. Okay, cool. All right. So, I mean, did we have? I could go on for another 2 hours if you like, but like, do we have any other questions that you wanted to ask?
Okay.
You can ask about AS400 as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So far, we have not received any question from the audience relevant to your presentation, sir.
Okay, so we have.
Okay, wait. Let me check the QA. So chat in the chat
for Don
panel.
John as well.
Yes.
Is the IBM Cloud intended for non-x86 servers and apps, AS400 iSeries? Okay, no. So we cater for all. Okay, let me just like give you a demo right now. Okay, so I just go to my catalog here. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of service offerings. Like we do everything from x86 all the way to HPC and all the way to AIX as well as PBS. Okay, so for power systems, we've got VMware, we've got regular like bare metals, and we've got the best bare metal machines on available. Of course, regular virtual machines, virtual private cloud, etc., as well as a whole bunch of other stuff like developer, DevOps, containers, and that type of thing. Does that make sense? Okay, so whatever you need, we probably will have a service for that. Yeah, do we have any additional questions? Did I answer your question, Don? Hopefully, yes. Okay, great, awesome. If Theo, did you have a question? Because I see you raised your hand. Maybe in the chats. Cool. All right. So I think that wraps up my section.